Welcome to this episode. Today we take you to the small town of Weingarten in Upper Swabia, in the federal state of Baden-Württemberg in southern Germany. Nestled in the gentle hills above the Schussen Valley, this town of about 25,000 inhabitants is home to one of the most remarkable buildings in all of Germany, the Basilica of Saints Martin of Tours and Oswald. The basilica stands on the Martinsberg, the Martins Hill, rising above the surrounding landscape like a great stone crown. When you approach Weingarten for the first time and see this church emerge on the horizon, you might feel a moment of disbelief. A dome measuring 67 meters in height, a nave stretching 102 meters in length, towers flanking a facade of sweeping Baroque curves. This is not a cathedral of a great metropolis. This is a parish church in a small Swabian town, and it is the largest Baroque church north of the Alps. People have long called it the Swabian St. Peter's, a reference to the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome, which Abbot Sebastian Heiler consciously chose as a model when he ordered the new church to be built in 1715. Heiler chose the proportions deliberately. His church would be built at roughly half the scale of St. Peter's. Yet even at half that scale, the result is breathtaking. The story of this basilica is one of dynasties and devotion, of ancient relics and architectural genius, of a community's faith expressed in stone, fresco, and the sound of an extraordinary organ. It is a story that stretches from the 11th century all the way to the present day, with the holy blood relic of Christ at its very heart. Chapter 1. Architecture. The church we see today was not the first to stand on the Martinsberg. For centuries, a Romanesque minster occupied the hill, a grand three-aisled columned basilica built between 1124 and 1182. But by the early 18th century, Abbot Sebastian Hiller, who led the prosperous Benedictine Imperial Abbey of Weingarten, decided that the ancient relic of the Holy Blood deserved a far more magnificent shrine. In 1715, he ordered the Romanesque church to be largely demolished and a new Baroque minster to be built in its place. To design this monumental project, Abbot Heller turned to two architects of the celebrated Vorarlberg school. The first was Franz Beer II, one of the most prolific Baroque church builders in southern Germany and Switzerland. Beer had already designed dozens of abbeys and monastery churches across a vast geographic range, always working within the Vorarlberg wall pillar scheme, a distinctive architectural system developed by craftsmen and architects from the Vorarlberg region of what is today Austria. Beer was joined in the initial planning phase by Johann Jakob Herkomer from Füssen, who delivered a design sketch in 1713 that provided the basis for Beer's decisive plans. The cornerstone of the Baroque church was laid on the 22nd of August, 1715. However, in 1716, Franz Beer stepped back from leading the construction, and from 1717 onwards, a new master builder took the helm, Donato Giuseppe Frisoni, the Württemberg court architect. Frisoni, who was simultaneously working on the Grand Palace of Ludwigsburg for the Duke of Württemberg, proved to be the decisive architectural mind behind the church's most spectacular feature, its great drum dome. It is to Frisoni that we owe the crowning dome of Weingarten, an architectural achievement so unusual in the German-speaking world of the time that it became a defining characteristic of the entire building. The total construction costs were recorded at 273,000 guilders, paid entirely in cash, a remarkable demonstration of the abbey's wealth. The church was consecrated on the 10th of September, 1724, by Johann Franz Schenk von Stauffenberg, the Bishop of Constance, during the tenure of Abbot Hiller himself. From the laying of the cornerstone to the completion of the dome, the construction took 9 years. To understand Weingarten's architecture, one must first understand the Vorarlberg school of Baroque design. This tradition emerged in the late 17th century from a group of craftsmen architects and master builders from the Bregenz Forest and the Vorarlberg region. They developed a system of church design centered on the wall pillar hall, a nave where massive structural pillars are embedded into the walls, creating a series of side chapels and upper galleries between them. The result is an interior that feels simultaneously immense and coherent, a space that draws every eye toward the high altar. Weingarten is among the supreme achievements of the Vorarlberg school, yet it adds something the simpler Vorarlberg hall churches lack: the great transept crossing, and its drum dome. The inspiration for these features was drawn partly from the Cathedral of Salzburg and from the Italian Baroque tradition that Frisoni knew well from his time in Württemberg service. The combination is unique in Upper Swabia. Nowhere else north of the Alps did a Vorarlberg-style church receive a monumental drum dome of this kind. The facade of the basilica is itself a masterwork of restrained drama. It stretches across 7 bays, with the central section pushing forward in a bold convex curve. Colossal pilasters frame the composition, and 12 large round-arch windows flood the upper levels with light. Between the twin towers rises a gable crown with scrolls and volutes. At its center, a statue of the Virgin Mary. The towers themselves are set wide apart, following Franz Beer's characteristic signature. From a distance, the drum dome rises behind the facade and dominates the entire townscape of Weingarten. Stepping inside the basilica is an experience that has moved visitors for 3 centuries. The entire interior is kept in brilliant white, against which the ceiling frescoes and richly colored altars create a vivid theatrical contrast. The space is structured around 7 sections: 3 wide bays of the nave, the dome crossing, the choir, and entrance and altar vestibules. The wall pillars carry the vaulting and direct the visitor's gaze forward to the high altar in an irresistible architectural gesture. The galleries set back between the pillars give the interior an almost basilica-like sense of width and openness. Daylight enters through large windows that bathe every corner in brightness, reinforcing the heavenward aspiration of the whole design. The crossing is surrounded by 4 massive pillar clusters carrying double transverse arches, above which the drum dome rises on its high timbre. The stucco decoration of the interior was created primarily by Franz Xaver Schmuser from Weserbrunn, one of the great centers of Baroque stucco craft in Bavaria. Working from 1718 under the direction of Donato Giuseppe Frisoni, Schmuser and his team covered the architectural framework in intricate bands of strapwork, tendrils, and rosette forms, providing a rich ornamental texture that contrasts with the white plaster surfaces. Additional stucco work was executed by Giacomo Antonio Corbellini. The choir stalls, completed between 1720 and 1724 by the sculptor and stucco artist Joseph Anton Feuchtmayer, are among the most celebrated pieces of Baroque woodcarving in southern Germany. Feuchtmayer, who was born in 1696 and would go on to create sculptures for some of the greatest pilgrimage churches of Upper Swabia, brought to Weingarten a virtuosity that combines monumental scale with intimate detail. The high altar was designed by Frisoni himself, its powerful columnar architecture rising to fill the entire apse. The figures were carved by Diego Carlone between 1719 and 1723, and the central altarpiece was painted by Carlo Carlone. The painting shows the holy blood flowing from the side wound of Christ over the globe of the world, carried by angels. A direct and moving visual meditation on the meaning of the relic preserved just beneath the altar table. No description of Weingarten's architecture would be complete without a long pause before the ceiling frescoes. Between 1718 and 1720, the Bavarian painter Cosmas Damian Asam covered approximately 1,100 square meters of vaulted ceiling with some of the most extraordinary Baroque frescoes in Europe. Asam was part of the famous Asam brothers duo. He and his brother, Egid Quirin Asam, were together the foremost exponents of the total Baroque artwork in the German-speaking world. The frescoes at Weingarten are among the largest continuous Baroque fresco cycles in Europe. They follow a carefully devised theological program. In the first bay of the nave, Asam painted the scene of the gaining of the holy blood relic. Christ's blood flows from his side wound, and below the stream the relic already appears on a red cushion, with St. Longinus holding his lance on the right. The coat of arms of Abbot Sebastian Heiler, surrounded by grapevines, appears in the frame, a visual signature connecting the donor to the sacred narrative. Moving through the nave, the second bay shows the glory of Saint Benedict enthroned on clouds among popes and saints. The third bay presents the Assumption of the Virgin, Mary ascending heavenward surrounded by music-making angels, while the apostles gather around her empty tomb below. Above the crossing, the vast dome fresco shows the assembly of all saints in heaven. God the Father sits on the globe of the world. Christ offers the crown, and Mary appears in blue and red. John the Baptist, the Apostle Peter, King David with his harp, Helena with the true cross, Saint Cecilia at the organ, and countless angelic faces press forward on cloud banks in one of the most ambitious visions of heavenly glory in Baroque painting. The choir fresco depicts the miracle of Pentecost, with the Holy Spirit descending as a dove through an oculus opening to heaven. Each fresco in the transept arms shows allegorical figures of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. The theological logic connecting all these images is deliberately centered on the relic. The visitor moves through a narrative arc from the moment the blood was caught at Calvary, through the glory of the church and its saints, to the eternal presence of God himself. The entire church functions, in the words of one historian, as a kind of great reliquary for the holy blood. On the western gallery of the basilica stands what many experts consider one of the most remarkable Baroque organs ever built. It was constructed by the master organ builder Joseph Gabler between 1737 and 1750, a process that took 13 difficult and financially ruinous years for Gabler himself. The result is an instrument of extraordinary beauty and ingenuity. The fundamental challenge Gabler faced was architectural. The western gallery, where the organ was to stand, had 6 windows in the facade that could not be covered. Any normal organ case would have blocked them entirely. Gabler's solution was to design a case of 7 sections and multiple towers, arranged around the windows so that light could still pass through while the pipes occupied the spaces between. The solution was so elegant and so effective that it was later used by other organ builders facing the same problem, most notably Johann Nepomuk Holzhey at the Abbey Church of Neresheim. The organ has 4 manuals and 63 stops, with approximately 6,890 pipes distributed across its 7 sections. According to legend, Gabler built 6,666 pipes, a number said to correspond to the lashes dealt to Christ during his passion. The legend continues that Gabler, unable to afford to complete the instrument, struck a bargain with the devil himself in exchange for the secret of the vox humana stop, a register so lifelike in its imitation of the human singing voice that it immediately gave rise to supernatural explanations. The vox humana stop at Weingarten is genuinely extraordinary. Modern acoustic analysis has confirmed that it produces characteristics objectively similar to those of the human voice in a way that few other organ pipes have achieved. The freestanding console of the organ is one of the earliest of its kind in existence, adorned with ivory stop knobs and intricate marquetry inlays. Among the organ's more delightful features are stops producing a cuckoo call, a nightingale song, timpani, and 2 sets of bells, including pedal bells arranged artistically into clusters in the shape of bunches of grapes, a playful reference to the name Weingarten, which means vineyard in German. The basilica also possesses a choir organ, built by Gabler between 1739 and 1743. It was restored in 2012 by the Freiburger Orgelbau Workshop. Together, the 2 organs make the Basilica of Weingarten one of the foremost centers of historical organ music in the German-speaking world. The bell towers of the basilica carry a remarkable set of 11 bells. The most celebrated is the Hosanna bell in the North Tower, cast in 1490 by Hans Ernst of Stuttgart and weighing 6,190 kilograms. It is the oldest and largest bell in the basilica and the largest in the entire diocese of Rottenburg-Stuttgart. The Hosanna bell is rung only on very special occasions, though it strikes the hour regularly. Around the Hosanna bell, a famous legend has grown. The bell's tone is said to carry on the north wind as far as the city of St. Gallen in Switzerland. The citizens of St. Gallen, so the story goes, believed that this ringing drove bad weather from the north toward their city. Determined to silence it forever, they sent agents to steal the bell. The theft was initially successful, but when the wagon carrying the enormous bell reached the town of Buchhorn, today known as Friedrichshafen on Lake Constance, it became stuck fast in the earth and could not be moved. The people of Weingarten caught up with the thieves, reclaimed their bell, and brought it safely home. Whether this legend is true or not, it speaks to something real. The Hosanna bell was and remains a symbol of the entire community of Weingarten, its sound a living voice connecting the present town to its centuries-old monastic past. Chapter 2. History. The story of the Basilica of Weingarten begins not in the 18th century, but in the 11th, and not even in the 11th century, but long before. The hill on which the basilica stands, the Martinsburg, was an important site of power for many centuries. In the 10th century, the Swabian branch of the Guelph dynasty, one of the great noble houses of medieval Europe, maintained their ancestral seat here. The site itself was even older. It had previously been an Alemannic lord's residence, built beside a Germanic pagan sanctuary. When the Guelphs converted to Christianity, their church on this hill was dedicated to Saint Martin of Tours, the patron saint of the Frankish realm from which the Guelph family had originally migrated. In 1056, a date that marks the true founding of what would become the Great Abbey, Welf IV, Duke of Bavaria, established a Benedictine monastery here as the family burial place of the Guelphs. He settled it with monks from Altemünster Abbey in Bavaria. Welf himself was buried here after his death around 1101. In the following decades, 12 members of the Guelph dynasty were buried in the monastery church, making it one of the most important dynastic shrines in all of medieval Germany. In 1124, construction began on the great Romanesque minster that would serve the abbey for nearly 6 centuries. This was a high Romanesque three-aisled columned basilica, modeled partly on the Cathedral of Reichenau-Mittelsau. It was consecrated in 1182. Remains of this Romanesque predecessor can still be seen today beside the south tower of the present basilica, in the form of a pillar fragment with an arch beginning. The event that would define Weingarten's destiny forever came in the 1094. In that year, Judith of Flanders, the wife of Welf IV, made a gift to the monastery that transformed it from a dynastic burial church into one of the most important pilgrimage sites in the German-speaking world. She gave the monks a relic of the Holy Blood of Christ. The history of this relic is layered with centuries of tradition and faith. According to the tradition preserved at Weingarten, the relic contains drops of Christ's blood mixed with earth from Golgotha. The blood was gathered by the Roman soldier Longinus, who pierced Christ's side with his lance during the crucifixion. Longinus, who was venerated as a saint by the Catholic Church, was according to tradition converted to Christianity by this act. He is said to have carried the relic to Mantua in northern Italy, where it was buried during the turbulent centuries of late antiquity and rediscovered in 804. In 1048, the relic was solemnly elevated in the presence of Pope Leo IX and the Emperor Henry III, then divided into 3 portions, one to the city of Mantua, one to the Pope, and one to the Emperor. Henry III bequeathed his share of the relic to Count Baldwin V of Flanders. Baldwin gave it to his daughter Judith, who brought it with her when she married Welf IV of Bavaria. The solemn presentation of the relic to the monks of Weingarten took place on the 4th of March, 1094. From that moment, Weingarten became a major pilgrimage destination. The relic drew the faithful from across Upper Swabia and beyond. By 1400, it had already attracted countless pilgrims. The imperial abbey grew in wealth, prestige, and influence. The relic is displayed today at the main altar behind a glass panel, enclosed within a golden cross reliquary. The history of the abbey was not one of uninterrupted prosperity. In 1803, amid the upheavals of the Napoleonic era, the Benedictine Imperial Abbey of Weingarten was dissolved by the secularization decrees. Its monks were dispersed, its lands distributed. The magnificent new Baroque church, only 79 years old, became a simple parish church for the community of Weingarten. In 1811, the former monastery church officially assumed the role of the parish church of the Catholic parish of St. Martin, a role it continues to fulfill today. For over a century, the Martinsburg stood without its monks. Then in 1922, the Benedictines returned. A community from the Buron congregation resettled the abbey, and for the first time since the Napoleonic dissolution, the sound of the divine office once again echoed through the great church. The Benedictines remained at Weingarten until 2010, when the last monks departed. Since then, the basilica has continued as a parish church, its musical and spiritual life sustained by the Basilica Corps, the parish community, and a dedicated circle of friends and supporters of the basilica's music. One of the more touching episodes in the basilica's modern history involves the British royal connection. The 9 members of the Guelph dynasty buried in the church, including Welf IV, the abbey's founder, were transferred in 1724 to a new crypt beneath the north transept when the Baroque church was completed. Over the following century and a half, this resting place fell into neglect. In 1852, King Georg V of Hanover, a direct descendant of the Guelph dynasty and a forefather of the British royal house of Windsor, came to Weingarten to visit the graves of his ancestors. He found the crypt in a state unworthy of the founders. Moved by what he saw, he commissioned the Munich court architect Leo von Klenze to restore the crypt in the neo-Romanesque style. The work was completed in 1859 and 1860. A stone balustrade was installed bearing a plaque with the words Welfengruft, the Guelph Vault, above the royal arms of Georg V with his motto Suscipere et finire, which means to begin and to complete. The coat of arms bears the heraldic unicorn and lion of the House of Hanover. It is a remarkable moment of dynastic continuity, a Victorian-era king from Hanover, whose family would become the British House of Windsor, honoring ancestors buried in a small Swabian abbey town in a church built above the ancient home of their dynasty. A copy of the famous Brunswick lion, symbol of the Guelphs, has stood in the monastery courtyard adjacent to the basilica since 1999. In 2024, the Basilica of Weingarten celebrated the 300th anniversary of its consecration. The festivities ran throughout the year, with a formal celebration week from the 10th to the 15th of September. Exactly 300 years after the original consecration on the 10th of September, 1724. The anniversary year included concerts, guided tours, exhibitions, and special masses. The Basilica Choir performed with choirs and orchestras from the region and beyond. A special commemorative postage stamp was issued. A light installation illuminated the exterior of the basilica over several weeks. The anniversary was a demonstration of how deeply the basilica is woven into the identity and cultural life of Weingarten and the surrounding region. Chapter 3. Spiritual Importance. The basilica is dedicated jointly to 2 saints, Martin of Tours and Oswald of Northumbria. The dedication to Martin reflects the church's oldest roots. Saint Martin, who lived in the 4th century and became Bishop of Tours in Gaul, was the patron saint of the Frankish realm and one of the most widely venerated saints of the early medieval West. The Guelphs, coming from the Frankish heartland between the Meuse and Moselle rivers, brought this dedication with them when they established their seat on the Martinsburg. Martin has given the hill and the original church their name for well over 1,000 years. St. Oswald, the Christian king of Northumbria, who was martyred in 642, appears in the dedication as a reflection of the abbey's deep connections with the monastic world of England and Flanders. Judith of Flanders, the donor of the Holy Blood relic, came from the county of Flanders, which had strong ties to Anglo-Saxon monasticism. Oswald was venerated across northern England and the Low Countries, and his inclusion in the dedication is a tribute to the Flemish-English heritage that Judith brought to Weingarten. At the spiritual heart of the basilica stands the relic of the Holy Blood. For the Catholic tradition, the veneration of relics is an expression of the belief that the saints and the sacred objects associated with Christ and his saints remain tangible points of connection between the earthly and the heavenly. A relic of the blood of Christ is among the most extraordinary of all relics, bringing the believer into a direct encounter with the central mystery of Christian faith. That God became human, suffered, died, and rose again for the salvation of the world. The relic at Weingarten is preserved in a golden cross reliquary and displayed at the center of the high altar behind a glass panel. The altar painting above it, by Carlo Carloni, shows the holy blood flowing from Christ's side wound over the entire world. A visual theology declaring that the redemption worked by Christ's sacrifice extends to all of creation. This image of universality is matched by the fresco in the first nave bay. Asam painted the moment of the relic's origin, the lance thrust of Longinus, and the blood flowing from the wound, with the relic itself already visible on its cushion below, as if to say that this place, this church, this altar, is the very continuation of that sacred moment on Calvary. The basilica was thus deliberately designed as what scholars have called a great reliquary, an architectural vessel built to enshrine and proclaim the significance of the relic. Every artistic and architectural decision in the building can be understood in light of this purpose. The most vivid expression of the spiritual importance of Weingarten's relic is the annual procession known as the Blutrit, the Ride of the Holy Blood, which takes place on Blood Friday, the Friday after Ascension Thursday. This event is believed to be one of the largest equestrian processions in all of Europe. The procession's origins reach back to the presentation of the relic in 1094, which according to tradition took place on a Friday after Ascension Thursday. By the 15th century at the latest, an equestrian procession had developed alongside the traditional foot pilgrimage. The first written reference to the Blutrit dates from 1529, which already describes it as an established custom. During the Baroque period, the procession reached extraordinary dimensions. In 1753, it is recorded that 7,055 riders took part, a number that staggers the imagination. The relic is carried by a rider at the head of the procession, traditionally the abbot of the monastery, and today the pastor of the Basilica community, on horseback through the fields surrounding Weingarten. The procession carries the blessing of the Holy Blood out into the countryside, with a prayer for the protection of creation and a rich harvest. In its original theological meaning, the Blutrit was understood as a purifying and protecting ride around the boundaries of the community's land. The procession was banned in 1812 during the period of Enlightenment-inspired suppression of popular piety. But the people of Weingarten and the surrounding region refused to let the tradition die. Even during the Prohibition, small groups of riders quietly continued the custom on their own. Since 1849, the Blutrit has taken place every year without interruption. In recent years, it regularly draws around 3,000 riders, along with many tens of thousands of pilgrims and spectators. The relic that occasions this great gathering rests in the altar of the Basilica for the whole year, venerated by visitors from across the region and beyond. The Blutrit is not a piece of folklore or a tourist attraction. It is a living act of faith, an expression of the continuity between the faith of the 11th century and the faith of the present day. It connects the city of Weingarten in a bond of devotion to its partner city of Mantua, from which the relic originally came, and delegations from both cities regularly visit each other's Holy Blood celebrations. In 1956, on the occasion of the 900th anniversary of the founding of the Benedictine Abbey by Welf IV, Pope Pius XII elevated the church to the status of a basilica minor. This papal dignity recognizes a church's outstanding historical, spiritual, and artistic significance, and its special connection to the life of the Catholic Church. The title of Basilica Minor carries with it particular liturgical privileges and places the church in a direct relationship with the See of Rome. It is an acknowledgement that the Church of Saints Martin and Oswald in Weingarten is not merely a local parish church, but a place of significance for the universal Catholic Church. It is worth noting that the building is technically not a basilica in the strict architectural sense. Its spatial structure is that of a wall-pillar hall church with galleries. The title is therefore entirely an honorary and ecclesiastical one, awarded for the richness of the church's history, its role as a pilgrimage center, and the outstanding quality of its art and architecture. The elevation took place under the pontificate of Pope Pius XII, who reigned from 1939 to 1958 and under whom several major German churches received this distinction in the post-war years. The spiritual significance of the basilica extends into the landscape around it through the Martinusweg, a pilgrimage path officially opened on the 15th of April, 2011. This route passes through the entire Diocese of Rottenburg-Stuttgart and the Archdiocese of Freiburg, crossing Baden-Württemberg in a network of main routes and regional branches. The southern regional branch, running through the Bodensee, Allgäu, and Upper Swabia areas, passes directly through Weingarten and the Basilica, making the church a waypoint for pilgrims walking in the footsteps of St. Martin across southern Germany. Summary. We have walked a long road through the history of the Basilica of Saints, Martin of Tours and Oswald in Weingarten. We began on the Martinsburg in the early medieval era, where the Guelph dynasty established their seat and their church above an ancient hilltop sanctuary. We followed the line of history through the founding of the Benedictine Abbey in 1056, through the donation of the Holy Blood relic by Judith of Flanders in 1094, through the construction of the great Romanesque minster, and then its replacement by the largest Baroque church north of the Alps between 1715 and 1724. We have described the architectural vision of Franz Beer, Johann Jakob Herkomer, and Donato Giuseppe Frassoni, and how together they created a building that synthesizes the Vorarlberg school with the grandeur of Italian and Salzburg Baroque. We have gazed up at the 1,100 square meters of fresco painted by Cosmas Damian Asam, from the moment of the Holy Blood's gathering at Calvary to the great assembly of the saints in heaven. We have stood before the choir stalls of Joseph Anton Folkmeyer and the columnar high altar with its painting of the Holy Blood flowing over the world, and we have listened in imagination to the 6,000 and more pipes of Joseph Gabler's extraordinary organ, with its vox humana voice, its cuckoo, its bells shaped like grape clusters. We have recalled the dissolution of the Abbey in 1803, the return of the Benedictines in 1922, and their departure again in 2010. We have stood at the Guelph crypt and considered the connection between a small Swabian town and the royal houses of Hanover and Windsor. We have walked with the thousands of riders in the annual Blutrit procession through the fields of Weingarten, carrying the relic of the Holy Blood across the land in an act of faith that has continued for more than 500 years. And we have heard how, in 1956, Pope Pius XII recognized all of this history, faith, and beauty by elevating the church to the rank of a basilica minor, an honor that connects the parish community of Weingarten directly to the Universal Church of Rome. The Basilica of Weingarten is an extraordinary place. It is a monument to the capacity of human hands to create something that aspires toward the eternal. It is a living community of faith, music, and prayer. It is a place where the medieval and the modern meet, where a relic venerated for over 900 years still draws the faithful from across the region, and where the sound of bells and organ music still fills the valley of the Schussen as it has for many centuries. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and take some time to rate the podcast. It really helps us.